Test, test, test.
Answer.
Just waiting for my computer. It seems it's taking its time for some reason this morning. Well, we could fill the void with impromptu chit-chat, just like they do on newscasts.
Sir, when did you first own a computer?
Oh my goodness. Well, my father always kind of had computers in the household because they were, this was back in like the late 80s, early 90s. The alternative to having a computer and a word processor was to have a secretary type things out for you. So, like type out as many copies as you needed on a typewriter. Oh, there we go. So the invention of the word processor printer combination basically put typists out of work, but at the same time it was possible to run a weekly bulletin. So the first computer that my father bought that was in the household cost $4,000. It was a Linden Series Pro, which was it was an Apple clone, an Apple II clone, I believe. So that would be the earliest computer that was in the household. I got to play Phonics Plus on it.
Wow.
Yeah, because I was of the age that it was. No. Oh, there we go. Phonics was about the stage in my education I was at. So.
Did your father ever get an original Macintosh?
No, we were never wealthy enough to own an actual Mac. We always had to get the knockoffs. The first computer that was like properly my own, I was given the family computer once a new Pentium machine was purchased. Pentium 1. It was a compact Presario 486.
You could run Doom on that.
You could run Doom on that, yeah. Yeah. But I don't know. There were certain segments of the population at the time that felt that shareware was not of sufficient moral purity to be put on your computer. It probably was just viruses. So I missed out on a very important segment of gaming history.
Wow.
Mm. Of course, I was a child at the time, so what did I know?
You just knew that it was
Yeah, no, it's oh, my mother, if she had seen Doom, the video game, yeah, no way, man. Like I basically, like, I couldn't play Zelda until I was like 14 because it had somebody getting hit with a sword in it, you know?
Good heavens.
Yes, well, parents of the 90s, let me tell you.
I'm pretty sure it was one of the reasons why ESRB was created.
Yeah.
It's also Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, but Mortal Kombat, and Doom is Doom.
Get out of here. Close all. There we go. Yeah. Doop, doop, doop. Good. So, good. So, picking up where we left off, there we go. So we left off with the CSV. We've done reading. We did a reading example with CSVs. We had done a writing example with CSVs, so we've pretty much covered all of the CSV material at this point. Just to quickly review what a CSV even is. It's when you have a spreadsheet, table-like piece of data, and you wish to express it in plain text inside of a plain text file. Basic. Despite the fact that it's very simple, it's also madly popular. That's one thing that you'll find is frequently the case, not just in computing, but in life in general. Occam's razor, the simpler solution is normally preferable. And because CSV files are much simpler than ordinary spreadsheets, for many applications they are preferable. So, good. Okay. So, just a couple of points to clear things up. A couple of final points. Sometimes, the information that you'd like to store inside of a CSV file will itself contain a comma. In order to store this type of information, simply enclose the data, the data point, or the string, or whatever it is, in double quotes, and that will tell whoever is interpreting the CSV file that the comma is intended to be part of the string and not the delimiter between two columns. Because if it worked for these quotes, it would be Chen, Alice, the Princess of Wales, all as separate columns, and this row would overhang the rest of them by one column. Question?
What if there's both a comma and quotation marks?
Quotation marks you need to escape using the escape character. Yeah. And that's the rule everywhere. If you want to include double quotes in anything, excluding the two languages that we're talking about in this class, because we'll be talking about SQL pretty soon. SQL does quotes in the same way as Python, but the whole single quotes to get double quotes inside thing in Python is relatively unique to Python, because Python erroneously does not recognize the distinction between characters and strings, which is something we've talked about at length. Once again, I just would like to remind the class that I'm currently engaged in holy war against Python, so yeah. Additionally, accented characters, other alphabets, and emoji can be tricky depending on character encoding. This isn't really a point so much about CSV files, it's a point more generally about character encodings, right? If your character encoding is UTF-8, it means that emojis are not valid characters in the file. It'll show up as two different characters, right? Because you're taking the 16 bits and splitting them up into 8-bit chunks. If, on the other, depending on what program you're using, you may be working in either UTF-8 or UTF-16 or some other exotic character set. Normally, the safest thing to do is to stick to the basic characters that just exist on your keyboard insofar as that's possible. But, one can understand the need for using alphabets other than English. So, it is what it is. And this is slowly getting better as programs integrate greater degrees of international compatibility. This is like the base layer of international compatibility, right? Does your program support all of the characters composing alphabets from the rest of the world, right? So, furthermore, sometimes people use delimiters instead of commas. Technically speaking, this is incorrect. It should say separators. It is, after all, comma separated value, not comma delimited value. Can anybody tell me what a delimiter is? I've used the phrase several times. Yes, sir?
It's a character that's meant to separate the segments in a string.
Separates the segments in a string.
Like to indicate that this is a new, portion of something you're splitting up.
It's a more general type of thing than that. At the back, sir, or in the middle, I guess.
You mentioned how emojis have two characters. Well, it's composed of kind of 2 bits.
2 bytes, yeah.
2 bytes, yeah. So how does Python handle that? Say if you have one, would it do the second half of the first emoji or the second emoji?
Python is UTF-18 by default, so the extended character set will interpret normally as the extended character set in Python. But if you were working in C, that might not be the case. Make sense? If you're indexing it in C, you would get like the front half and the back half of the bits that compose the emoji as two separate indexes. Make sense?
Yeah.
Still trying to figure out what a delimiter is, though. Do you know what a delimiter is?
That's delimited. Well, I can only kind of say the same thing as the other guy said. It's
Okay.
something that separates values.
A delimiter is any character where you have two of them on either side of something, and they match, and they enclose something. So, right here, these parentheses are delimiting this phrase, right? If we go back to some actual code, round braces are the delimiters for the arguments to functions, right? Square braces are the delimiters to array access operations, right? So to delimit is to separate, right? Pardon me. So it's kind of like separators, but separators go in the middle, right? So the delimiters are on the end, and the characters in the middle that separate the arguments, those are the separators. And depending on what programming language you're using, you might be dealing with different characters that form these same purposes, right? For example, in Haskell, what separates functions from their arguments? What's the separator character? Space. Y'all should have said that all at the same time, because y'all are in 1JC3. Space. Space. So, thank you for that. If anybody here hasn't played the Portal games, that's your requirement to graduate this program. So, uncontroversial opinion of the week, right? So, Portal games are really good. Anyway, you can get them super, super cheap when they go on sale too. Yeah, like $1, yeah. So, anyway, sometimes a CSV file, despite being a comma-separated value file, will be separated by things other than commas. Sometimes you will have tabs, sometimes you will have vertical bars, sometimes you will have spaces. You know, in general, comma is most common, because if everybody's using the same thing, then these files can interact with each other. But a good CSV library will understand what it's being delimited by. Make sense? Good. If you want CSV information, you can get it off of the internet. You can also get it from the assignment. Wahey. So, JSON. JavaScript object notation. Originally a subset of the JavaScript programming language for representing objects. Incidentally, if you're using JavaScript right now, you should be using TypeScript instead. It's very much like JavaScript, except it actually has a type system. And I'm sure everybody in the room is familiar with my opinions on type systems. This is such a nerdy class. Like, take that out of context and put it into any other class, you know? Jeez. Anyway, well, you know, y'all signed up for the nerd degree, so. Yeah.
I signed up for the mic degree.
Well, I hope that comes true for you. A language so JavaScript object notation has been deemed useful, and thus has, like a phoenix rising from the ashes of the slightly bad language that it originated in. It has grown and become a very commonplace file format for a number of different data storage applications. When we go on in this course, we will study SQL, structured query language. SQL is a relational database model. Still very, very, very common and prevalent. Most of the time you interact with a username password system, you are interacting in the back end with an SQL database. Lately, there have been competitor database types that have been rising up in the market, which, have some advantages over the old relational database model. A lot of them are based on, use JSON as their underlying storage medium. For example, MongoDB. Has anybody heard of MongoDB? That uses JSON in the back end, which is kind of interesting. So, JavaScript object notation is composed, like a JSON file is composed of nested dictionaries and lists, in addition to various types of literal. They're commonly used for transmitting objects between applications. Question?
This is more of a comment, but I'm pretty sure MongoDB uses BSOC as a statement instead.
So, BSOC?
BSOC, B-S-O-X, that's binary JSON.
BSOC. Oh, okay, well, binary JSON is still,
It's just so differently because
yeah.
we code in binary instead of like the braces.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because it's more efficient to store things in binary than character encoding, right? But you do have to encode it and decode it. And I would say, whether it's binary or character encoded JSON, like, still JSON, come on, yeah? Yeah. So, it's nice to know there are people who actually know what they're talking about in the room. So, basic format of JSON file. The overall file is either a list or a dictionary at the top level. Every entry can be one of the following. A list, which is delimited by square braces. A dictionary, which is delimited by curly braces. Every key is a quoted string. So this is somewhat different from our representation in Python so far. In Python, literally any data type is permitted to be the key of a dictionary so long as it's not like a mutable data type, mutable aggregate data type. In JSON, they have to be strings, right? Just like in Python, a dictionary has a colon between the key and the value can be any other kind of entry. Question?
So if you dump a Python object to a JSON file, if it has like a non-string like key value, will it convert to like a string?
Presumably, yes.
Okay, I guess I have to look that one up.
Yeah. We can try it out. So, in addition to lists or dictionaries, JavaScript's object notation values may be numbers, ints, or floats. They can be strings, which are enclosed in double quotes, not single quotes. They can be booleans, true or false. They can also be null values. Conceivably others, but I think that's sufficient. So, here is an example of JSON in action. You see, and to the degree that you've been working with multiply nested data structures so far in the course, which has been, shall we say, a relatively light presence, kind of like an assignment question that springs to mind that's closest to the mindset required to work with this stuff is, you guys remember the dictionary, where you were able to look up words in various languages and in the nested dictionaries? That's kind of the mind that you need to be able to do this. So we are taking our, family tree example from famous fantasy novel from previously in the course. As a JSON file, the entire thing is a big list. We then have 3 dictionaries inside of it. The dictionaries have name, year, spouse, and children fields. And you can see that the children field has, in fact, another list nested inside of it. One very important feature of JSON, white space is irrelevant. It is not considered to be syntactically a necessary component of the JSON file. This makes JSON more like languages like C as compared to Python, right? So in this respect, JSON is to C as YAML is to Python, as we're going to see when we get to YAML. YAML files are basically JSON files which follow a more Python-esque convention with respect to indentation and white space, where it's actually loaded with semantic content, thus reducing the number of extraneous characters which the file requires, which is, in general, the sort of trend. That's the direction things are taking with respect to syntax lately, is minimal syntax. Oh man, I was looking up the Typo Index. Oh, do you guys know what the Typo Index is? Okay. Well, maybe it's pronounced bad, but it's Typo Index, or maybe it's TOB. I'm not sure. So the Typo Index, I'm just going to go with that for a pronunciation. It's a measure of the popularity of various programming languages. The way that it measures programming language popularity is by how frequently people search for aspects of that programming language on Google, which is, like, in theory, proportional to the number of people who are using the language, either for work purposes or for educational purposes. I would say Typo probably leans more heavily on education personally. I don't think that, an experienced Python developer has to look up as much about Python as a learner. I think that's fair to say. But imagine my heartbreak, all right? I want you to imagine how heartbroken I am that this is Python right now. Python being the most popular programming language. Truly a world gone mad, right? Now, I would just like to say, though, that if you notice, Python remained relatively stable despite being adopted very widely as a programming language for introductory programming courses about here. It hasn't really ramped up in popularity until we sort of hit the more general decline of Western civilization starting in 2018. So.
4 years people graduate in 2018 and they start bringing Python into the workforce.
Yeah, right? Yeah, that's the other thing. Ugh. So yeah, and you'll notice some of the other big hitters here. This guy's Java, who's like been on a slow decline for the last 20 years. This is C. So C you'll be learning at 1XC3 next semester, which I am most likely going to be teaching. So look forward to that. Oh, you won't want to applaud once you. Stop! Don't count your chickens until they hatch. One thing that I've actually been, one thing that's kind of, does actually lift my spirits slightly is that C++ is back up on the rise. But yeah, so this is just kind of an interesting one. C#'s down, Visual Basic is down, one wonders why it was ever up. PHP is down. Assembly language, okay. So this is why I think that Typo is slightly crap, because I do not believe that 1% of all programming is happening in assembly programming. That's bullshit. Yes?
Any idea why SQL has like just a straight line from 2004 to 2018?
I'm I'm guessing that there was no data.
Yeah.
So literally no one was using it between that period, maybe? I don't know. Yes?
Actually, I guess for assembly language, because a lot of older stuff was programmed in there, and so they had to either convert it or they're decompiling things that are written in assembly or something like that. Super Mario 64 that got recently compiled, most of it based in C, I'm pretty sure it has some aspects of assembly in it.
Yeah, a lot of emulator work and a lot of ROM hacks are of necessity in assembly language. Another interesting aspect of assembly language, however, believe it or not, assembly languages are not completely unpopular in the embedded systems space. And most particularly on these guys. Believe it or not, there's actually there is a community of assembly programmers who program things like ARM processors. Yes?
I have a theory for Visual Basic rising in 2020.
Tell me.
Ransomware.
Okay, explain.
A very common ransomware vector is through Microsoft Office macros, because Microsoft gives very little limitation to what they can run, and macros are written in Visual Basic.
So you think that that's primarily hackers?
Given the rise of ransomware in recent years, that's my theory.
Yeah, you're probably right about that. Jesus Christ. So, can I please have a solemn promise from all Windows users in the room right now that you'll at least try Linux? All right? How many people already running Linux? Yeah. See these people? These people are the kings of this program. Don't actually, you know what? Since I'm going to be teaching, the only thing that would prevent me teaching 1xC3 next semester is me getting a full-time job at Mohawk College, which I'm currently also in the process of doing interviews for. But next semester in 1xC3, 1xC3 is like half C programming, half Linux, right? So for those of you who are experienced Linux users in the crowd already, in terms of difficulty, we kind of cap out around pipes and filters. So, it's possible that, this is going to be another course where, you don't really get useful information until right at the very end, maybe, But for the overwhelming majority of you who are not currently Linux users, a fantastic thing that you could do over the break is to take an old computer that you don't care about anymore, that you wipe clean of any data that's currently on it, and install Linux on that bad boy. That's your homework for the Christmas break, okay? It will be helpful when you get to 1xC3. Yes?
Why would it have no data?
Because to install Linux on a computer requires you to reformat the hard drive. If you reformat the you can partition it and do a dual boot system, but, okay, very quickly. It's a mistake to partition a hard drive that has data you care about on it, because you don't know as the user which half of the disk space your important data is on. So what the partitioning process does is it takes a giant sword and it slices your drive down the middle and deletes everything on half of it, right? So if you want to set a computer up for dual booting, make sure there's nothing on it you care about. And, installing Linux as an operating system, I know the people with hands up are probably going to be talking about virtual machines. No?
USB, partition that USB for Linux, and therefore you wouldn't have actually done anything to the hard drive.
Live boot is what's called.
Yeah, there was that.
Okay, sure, but the speed for a live boot is really low in comparison to an actual installation. But sure, you can use the live CD feature, sure, but Sooner or later, you're going to want more hard drive space than just a USB drive, you know? Yes?
This is a bit of a comment. So I have a little brother who was really insistent on installing Linux on his USB drive.
Mm-hmm.
Then like he installed it a month later, it came to me. His USB wasn't working. I checked it out and it completely died.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing is, you guys have heard about the write limit on solid-state electronics? Some of you? Who has not heard of this? Okay, so solid-state electronics, flash drives, basically, the operational memory mechanism of USB drives, they have a limited number of write cycles that they can perform before the memory just blows up and corrupts and is no longer usable. Part of the problem with putting your operating system on flash memory is that, like a USB drive, for instance, is that long-term you're going to fry the drive, right? Because you're just going to run through all its read-write cycles and then the thing will be dead, you know? And given that solid-state drives are, you know, super fancy USB drives embedded in your computer itself, they're like higher degree of quality control. They're rated for more write operations, but they suffer from the same problem. If you know, there is still a purpose to magnetic drives, but yeah. So long story short, it would be absolutely advantageous next semester for all of you to have some Linux operating system installed natively on something. Given that you're all computer science majors, this should be a fun little task for over the break that shouldn't be too difficult for you. This should be the type of challenge that you can rise to, shall we say. Yes?
Which distribution of Linux?
I don't really care. Pretty much anyone you want to try out, but you can certainly shoot yourself in the foot. If you're new to Linux, I certainly wouldn't recommend Arch or Gentoo. You hear the sniggers? Those sniggers just backed up what I said. I'm running Mint. Mint is perfectly fine. I had a friend once who said anybody who's not running Ubuntu is a hipster. Ubuntu is like losing market share. It has been for a few years, but it's still perfectly, like it's become the base for a number of other distros like Mint. You know, if you want like, it depends on whether you want a more full-featured or bare-bones experience, you know. All I really care about is that you have a command prompt. You know, if you have a command prompt and a file system, then you can do 1xc3, and you know all of the standard programs that we're going to be using. But yes.
I advise Windows users converting to Linux to use Feron because Feron is the most Windows-like.
Feron is the most Windows-like. There you go. So if you want a more Windows-like experience, there you go. Yes?
Will we also have to have root access?
Sorry, what?
Will we also have to have root access?
No. Like for this, all you really need is a bash prompt. You know. You know, we're not going to do like. The course is already sufficiently challenging without having to introduce additional elements like that, shall we say. Most people will spend the first, you know, month of the course figuring out Git and how to navigate directory structures. So, so yeah, preview of coming attractions, I guess. Like, most people should have an old kind of busted laptop kicking around that kind of still works, right? Hopefully. Yeah. If your intent is to buy a new computer to do this too, be aware that anything with an ARM processor, they lock you out of the bootloader so you can't install Linux on it. All right? So, good. All right. Fantastic. What was I talking about? JSON files, yes. It's just got kind of that kind of a day, I guess. So, So back to JSON and Python, which kind of rhyme. So, the thing that I said last class still holds true. If you're answering the question and you see the word JSON in the question, the first thing you do is you import the JSON library, regardless of anything else that you may think to do. While it is, I would consider it within the possibility to write a small program which interprets a CSV file on a test if you forget to import the CSV library. That is completely impossible with a JSON. They are too complicated. It is way too complicated to write a JSON parser during a test. So, the process is slightly different. So, the first thing you do is you get the JSON data as a string using our normal file handling procedures. Possible by opening a file, then reading from the file handle. You'll want to read everything into one string, right? We then use the JSON.loadS or loadString method to parse the JSON data into a list or dictionary, or a list of dictionaries, or dictionary of lists, etc., etc., etc. Have you guys heard the word parse in this context? Yes? No? Yes? Oh, just
That's what they use in C#. That's how you convert things, is the dot parse.
yeah. It's very important nomenclature. Parsing is the first real step of any compilation process as well after pre-processing. Don't worry, we'll talk about it in 1xc3. So, we then access the list or dictionary normally in Python. So, when we say normally, we mean using regular list indexing or dictionary, item access. Make sense? Good. So, let's take a look at a quick example. So, one thing that might interest you slightly. Oh my goodness. I apologize for, well, it hasn't really been an issue with them now, right? So, if you'll notice, the Jupyter Notebook files that you have been using so far are, if you take a look at them in the plain text editor, a JSON file, right? So, these things can be read and interpreted as JSON files if you apply the correct methodology. So, this is a live coding session, so feel free to follow along if you haven't completely lost the will to live. So, string is read, or file handle dot read, contents is equal to JSON dot read string, or load, it's load string. how this works. Probably made some mistakes, but you know, it's all part of the process. Attribute error. I made a, let's see here. Import JSON. Curious. Maybe there's an error in this line.
There is only a local file and JSON document, right? I'm trying to import from the JSON module.
Oh, yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah. All right. That'll do it. So, turns out it's stupid to name your Python file the same thing as the library you're importing.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you know. Now you know. During an interview that I had yesterday, I said, during live coding, it's important for the professor to make mistakes because then the students get to see how mistakes are solved, and that might be more valuable than the actual exercise you're going through. No, I meant it to, no, I'm just, you know. Hey, there we go. This may surprise you to hear, but when I was an undergraduate, I was a B student. So, it is a list of dictionaries of lists of dictionaries of lists of dictionaries. If you want to access some particular thing inside of it, ordinarily the thing you want to do, actually read the damn file. So open the file up, take a look at what the labels in the dictionary are, and like select the correct ones according to what's actually in the file. It's like, if you're doing the assignment that requires you to do this, the expectation is that you will actually look at the files that you're trying to process, right? It's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be looking up in the dictionary is not like an appropriate excuse because, you know, you're given the whole file, yeah. Cells. So the interesting thing about the way Jupyter notebooks are structured, each of the like description blocks and the coding blocks they're all collected up under one sort of thing, which is called cells. It's a big list of cells. That's what the thing's composed of. And another interesting thing is like the source, right? That the source is what the cell contents actually are. You can see that this is a markdown cell, but almost horrifyingly, each line in a cell is stored as its own string inside of a list of strings, and instead of just using new line characters and R as a carriage return, instead of using R like these line separating characters to separate lines, they decide, no, we need to actually split the strings. So that's what they do, which I think probably shows that Jupyter was perhaps not put together by the most expert programmers. But, you know, so it goes.
That works. I guess. Okay. But, you know, Mussolini also made the trains run on time, so, you know, just because it works doesn't mean you're not evil.
What, are we not allowed to make jokes about Mussolini
I just
anymore?
want the super people to appreciate that.
Go ahead. Jesus. For the record, I do not like fascism. I am not an advocate of fascism. I was talking about Mussolini primarily to make fun of him. Notice that in that I did say that I thought he was evil. So, anyway, so in addition to being able to load strings, load JSON data from strings, the corresponding reverse process for some reason is called dump. So you can dump your JSON data into a string, json.dumpsd. Then, once it's in string form, you can write it into the file the normal way we write things into files. Make sense? Good. Many websites will provide some access to their data in an automated way via web application programming interfaces, or APIs. Data returned from web APIs often is in JSON format. For example, Facebook, Instagram, and another site, which is probably controversial to talk about now, is all of these websites are using JSON encoded data in the back end to transmit things like images and information about images. So I know the print here is like really, really tiny, but this is an Instagram post. This is what an Instagram post actually looks like. The images themselves will be stored separately in other servers. You can see that Instagram is using Amazon Web Service for their back-end storage of images. But, I mean, who isn't, right? You've got the username of the person who posted it, the text associated with its time of creation. Incidentally, what time format is that, folks? I believe I talked about it earlier in the course.
Would that be a Unix timestamp?
Yeah, that's Unix epoch time. Very good. So yeah, all of this information is stored in JSON and then taken in by the the website and rendered into your Instagram post with the image fetched and everything else. So one interesting thing, the filter is a tag on the Instagram post itself. They don't actually alter the image until rendering, which is kind of interesting, right? So like in the central database, the image is just in its regular raw form. But anyway, thank you very much for your time and attention, folks. We'll see you next week.